"Make it quick, but don't come inside," she said. The words hung in the cold Colorado air like frost, sharp enough to cut. Clara Whitmore stood at her own bedroom door, her hand frozen on the wood frame, watching her husband James button his shirt with trembling fingers. He wouldn't look at her, wouldn't meet those green eyes that used to make him lose his breath. They used to make love in the high meadow where no one could hear Clara Whitmore scream his name. The giant bride, powerful, untamed, 6'2" of woman, had never felt beautiful until James touched her. He made her believe her strength was sensual, her size was glorious. "Make it quick, but don't come inside," he'd whisper urgently in those early days, barely able to contain himself. But that was 1867. By 1876, those words meant something different. Stay out. Don't touch me. Don't ask for what I won't give. Clara lay awake in their bed, burning with needs she couldn't voice, while James made excuses. Too tired. Too much work. Meanwhile, the rancher did it, spent his passion 8 miles south with Annalisa Cortez. 3 children proved his body still worked, still wanted, still needed. Just not with Clara. And then he had a wife starving for the intimacy he gave freely to another woman. But Clara didn't know any of that yet. Not on this morning in April 1876, standing in her bedroom doorway, watching the man she loved treat her like hired help. "James," she said quietly. Her voice was steady, but something underneath it cracked. "James, please, just talk to me." He finally looked at her then, and what she saw in his eyes was worse than anger. It was nothing, complete and total nothing, like she was a piece of furniture, like she was the hired help asking for something unreasonable. "Clara, I have cattle business in the South Valley. I'll be gone 3 days, maybe 4. His voice was flat, professional, the voice he used with the bank manager. 3 days. That's how long it had been since he'd touched her. No, 3 months. Or was it longer? Clara had stopped counting, stopped reaching across the bed at night, only to find his back turned, his breathing steady with sleep or the pretense of it. She remembered when he couldn't keep his hands off her. Spring of 1867, when she first arrived in Twin Forks Valley with nothing but the money she'd saved from cooking in mining camps and the determination to build something real. James had swagger then, charm. He'd looked at her, really looked at her, and instead of flinching at her height like most men, his eyes had gone dark with want. "You're magnificent," he'd whispered the first time they kissed behind the general store. His hands shook when he touched her waist. Like a goddess, like something carved from the mountains themselves. Clara had never felt beautiful before that moment. Growing up in Ohio, she'd been the tall girl, the giant, the one boys laughed at and girls pitied. But James made her feel powerful in a different way, desirable. He'd trace the calluses on her palms and kiss each one. He'd run his hands down her long legs and tell her she was perfect. And the passion, God, the passion. They couldn't keep their hands off each other those first years. In the barn, in the high meadow, against the wall of the unfinished house she was building with her own hands. "Make it quick," he'd gasp, already unbuttoning his pants. "But don't come inside yet. I need you now, Clara. I need you." She'd felt wanted then, needed, like her body was something worth craving. Now, standing in the doorway, she couldn't remember the last time he'd looked at her with desire. The last time he'd reached for her in the dark. The last time his breath had caught when she walked into a room. "It snowed 2 feet in the South Pass," Clara said. Each word felt like pulling teeth. "You can't get through, then I'll stay with the Hendersons. Or the Cortez place if I have to." He said it so casually, so easily, like the name meant nothing. The Cortez place. Clara felt something twist in her chest. She'd heard that name before, once, twice. She'd never thought about it, never questioned it. Why would she? She trusted him. She'd given him everything, her money, her labor, her body, 9 years of her life breaking her back to build his dream. Their dream, she'd always told herself. Their dream together. "When will you be back?" she asked. "When the business is done." He grabbed his coat, his saddlebag, moved past her so quickly she felt the air displace. He smelled like soap and leather and something else. Something sweet she couldn't place. Something that didn't belong, and then he was gone. Down the stairs, out the door, the sound of his horse's hooves fading into the morning, Clara stood alone in the bedroom. Their bedroom. Hers, really. She'd built it. Cut the logs, raised the walls, sanded the floors until her palms bled. But somehow it felt like she was the guest here, the intruder. She turned to make the bed, habit, muscle memory, 9 years of keeping this house perfect, and her foot kicked something under the bed frame. Something small and soft that made almost no sound when it hit the wall. Clara bent down. Her knees cracked. Everything hurt these days. 34 years old and her body felt ancient. Too much work. Too much weight. Too many babies her body couldn't hold. She pulled out a child's rag doll. Her breath stopped. The doll was beautiful, handmade, careful stitches. A little dress with embroidered flowers, dark yarn hair braided down its back, and across the bottom of the dress, sewn in careful letters, "Para mi Rosita con amor de papa," for my little Rose, with love from papa. Clara's hands started shaking. She couldn't make them stop. The bedroom spun slightly. She sat down hard on the edge of the bed, the cold, untouched bed where James barely slept anymore, and stared at the tiny dress, the careful stitches, the love sewn into every seam. Papa. Not uncle. Not family friend. Not neighbor. Papa James had a child. Somewhere out there in the Colorado Territory, James had a daughter named Rosita, who was loved enough that someone made her beautiful things. Someone who called him Papa. Someone who received gifts from him, while Clara received nothing but cold shoulders and excuses. Her throat closed. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The doll sat in her massive hands, hands that could break horses and mend fences and build empires from dirt, and she felt smaller than she'd ever felt in her entire life. How long? How long had this been happening? She turned the doll over with trembling fingers. The back of the dress had a date embroidered in tiny stitches. December 1875. December, 4 months ago, which meant the child was old enough to receive gifts. Old enough to be loved. Old enough to have a name and a father who remembered her at Christmas. Clara stood up. Her legs felt weak, but she made them work. She walked to the window and looked out at the ranch that stretched for miles in every direction. The Double W. Their brand burned into fence posts and cattle hides. Their name on the deed at the Territorial Land Office, except it wasn't really theirs, was it? Clara had bought this land with money she'd earned. Clara had broken the soil and built the fences and survived the drought of 1871 that killed half their herd. Clara had negotiated with Ute traders when supplies ran low. Clara had sat up 3 nights straight with sick calves when James was away on his business trips. How many of those trips had been to see this child? How many nights had Clara lain awake wondering why her husband didn't want her anymore, while he was 8 miles south, playing father to someone else's family? She looked down at the doll again. The careful embroidery, the love in every stitch. Someone had made this with patience and care. A woman's hands, small hands probably, delicate hands that knew how to sew pretty things for pretty children. Clara's hands were scarred and calloused. Rope burns and axe blisters and the permanent dirt under her nails that never quite washed clean. She'd lost 3 babies trying to build this ranch. 3 tiny lives that her body couldn't hold because she worked too hard, lifted too much, pushed herself too far, trying to prove she could do everything. And James had barely mourned them, barely noticed, just patted her shoulder awkwardly and said, "These things happen on the frontier, Clara. We'll try again." Except they hadn't tried again. He'd stopped touching her after the 3rd miscarriage, stopped looking at her, stopped wanting her because he'd already found someone else, someone who could give him what Clara couldn't, living children. A real family. The rage came then, not fast and hot but slow and cold, like winter settling into her bones. Clara Whitmore had survived the Oregon Trail alone after her parents died. She'd driven a wagon through hostile territory with nothing but determination and a rifle. She'd built a ranch from nothing. She'd earned every inch of this land with blood and sweat and years of her life, and James Whitmore had taken it all and used it to build a second life, a better life, a life where he got to be the father he'd never been with her. where he got to love a woman who probably didn't intimidate him with her size and strength, where he got to be the man he wanted to be, instead of the man who'd married Clara for her money and capabilities. She walked downstairs slowly, each step deliberate. The house was quiet except for the creak of the floorboards under her boots. She moved through the kitchen, her kitchen, with the stove she'd bought and the shelves she'd built, and stopped at the table where James kept his ledgers. She'd never looked at them before. He'd always said, "You handle the ranch, Clara. I'll handle the business." And she'd trusted him, believed him, let him manage the money while she did the actual work. Now she opened the top ledger with shaking hands. The numbers swam in front of her eyes. She wasn't good with figures, never had been, but even she could see the problem. Money going out that didn't match the cattle sold. Large cash withdrawals marked supplies that never arrived at the ranch. Monthly payments to something listed only as C property, Cortez property. Clara's vision blurred. She gripped the edge of the table hard enough that her knuckles went white. James wasn't just visiting another woman. He was supporting her, paying for her home, probably feeding her children, his children, with money earned from Clara's labor. She closed the ledger carefully and walked outside into the cold morning. The sun was rising over the eastern mountains now, painting the snow-covered peaks pink and gold. Beautiful, the kind of morning that used to fill her with hope. Now she felt nothing but the cold and the rage and something else underneath. Something that felt like grief, but cut deeper. Clara Whitmore stood in the yard of the ranch she'd built and realized she'd been alone for years. Maybe from the beginning. Maybe James had never really wanted her at all. Just her money, her work, her ability to turn wilderness into profit while he played house somewhere else. The rancher did it. James Whitmore had built a family, fathered children, loved another woman, all while Clara broke her back keeping his dream alive. And then he had a wife who'd just figured out she'd been a fool for 9 years. Clara didn't sleep that night. She lay in the cold bed staring at the ceiling, the doll on the nightstand beside her like evidence at a crime scene. Every creak of the house sounded like accusation. Every shadow looked like betrayal. When dawn finally broke, she rose with a clarity she hadn't felt in years. She wasn't going to cry, wasn't going to break. She was going to find out the truth. She rode into town at sunrise, the doll wrapped carefully in her saddlebag. Twin Forks Valley was just waking up, smoke rising from chimneys, the blacksmith already hammering, the smell of fresh bread from the bakery. Clara tied her horse outside Sarah Chen's general store and waited for the doors to open. Sarah appeared at 7 sharp, like always. She was a tiny woman, barely 5'2", Chinese with quick, intelligent eyes that saw everything. When she spotted Clara waiting, something flickered across her face. Recognition, maybe even relief. "Mrs. Whitmore," Sarah said, unlocking the door. "You're here early. I need to talk to you." Clara's voice was steady, calm. It scared her how calm she felt. Inside, surrounded by shelves of supplies and the smell of coffee and tobacco, Sarah moved behind the counter and pulled out a ledger. Not the regular store ledger. A second one, smaller, hidden. "I wondered when you'd come," Sarah said quietly. She slid the ledger across the counter. "You've traded fairly with me for 8 years, Mrs. Whitmore. You defended me when Johnson's miners got drunk and made trouble. I keep good records." Very good records. Clara opened the ledger with trembling hands. Page after page of purchases. James's purchases. Baby clothes in 1870, more in 1872, again in 1874, school primers last year. Women's medical supplies, children's shoes, fabric for dresses, toys, all separate from the household goods Clara ordered. All paid in cash, all carefully hidden across months and years. "Since 1869, Sarah said. Her voice was gentle but firm. "He's been buying for 2 households. I didn't know if you knew. I didn't know if I should tell you." Clara's hands gripped the counter. "The Cortez widow. Do you know her? Annalisa Cortez. Small homestead 8 miles south. Her family holds one of the old Spanish land grants." Sarah paused. The Americans have been trying to void those claims for years. A man married to her could claim the land through territorial law. The pieces fell into place like cards in a poker game. James hadn't just wanted another woman. He'd wanted her land, wanted to build an empire using Clara's labor and Annalisa's property. 2 women, 2 lives, one man playing them both. How many children? Clara's voice cracked for the first time. 3, Sarah said softly. Boys aged 6 and 4. A girl about 2. 3 living children, while Clara had buried 3 tiny bodies under the cottonwood tree. 3 healthy babies that proved James's body worked just fine. Just not with her. Clara closed the ledger carefully. May I borrow this? Keep it, Sarah said. It's yours now. Whatever you're planning to do, Mrs. Whitmore, you'll need evidence. And you'll need friends. Clara looked at the small woman across the counter.
Why are you helping me?
Because numbers don't lie, and because some debts are worth paying. Sarah's eyes were fierce. You stood up for me when no one else would. Now I stand up for you. Clara nodded once and walked out into the morning sun, the ledger under her arm and murder in her heart. Clara didn't sleep that night, or the next. She sat in the kitchen with the doll on the table in front of her, staring at it like it might explain everything. Like those tiny embroidered letters might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. They didn't. On the 3rd morning she saddled her horse before dawn. The mare sensed something different. Clara's hands were too tight on the reins, her jaw too set. She rode south through melting snow, following the path James always took on his business trips. 8 miles. That's all it was. 8 miles between her life and his other life. The Cortez homestead sat in a small valley where cottonwoods grew thick near a creek. The house was adobe, well-maintained, with smoke curling from the chimney. Flowers would grow in the window boxes come summer. It looked like a home, warm, lived in, loved. Clara's chest tightened. 3 children played in the yard. 2 boys chasing each other, their laughter cutting through the cold air. A little girl, maybe 2 years old, sat in the dirt making mud pies with chubby hands. Clara's breath caught. All 3 had dark hair, strong jawlines. The older boy had James's exact profile when he turned his head. The door opened and a woman emerged. Small, delicate, everything Clara wasn't. Dark hair pulled back in a braid, an apron tied around her tiny waist. She called to the children in Spanish, her voice musical and soft. Then she looked up and saw Clara sitting on her horse at the property line. Their eyes met across the distance, and something passed between them. Recognition, maybe, or just the terrible understanding that comes when 2 women realize they've been sharing the same man. The woman, Annalisa. It had to be Annalisa, went pale. Her hand flew to her throat. Clara dismounted slowly. Every movement felt heavy, like moving through water. She walked toward the house, and Annalisa stood frozen, watching her approach like watching a storm roll in. "You're Clara Whitmore," Annalisa said when Clara got close enough. Her English was accented but clear. Not a question. A statement. "I am." Clara's voice came out rougher than she intended. "And you're the widow Cortez. Except you're not exactly a widow to my husband, are you?" Annalisa's eyes filled with tears immediately. "Please. The children have his face." Clara cut her off, gesturing to the boys. "How long?" 7 years. The words came out broken, ashamed. "But I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know about you until when?" Clara's hands clenched into fists at her sides. 2 years ago. I saw your brand on cattle. Asked him about the double W. He said, Annalisa's voice cracked. He said you were business partners only, that there was no marriage, that he was helping you run the ranch, but his heart belonged to me. Clara felt something shatter inside her chest. And you believed him. I had 2 sons already. What choice did I have? Annalisa was crying now, tears streaming down her face. He promised to marry me once the ranch was established. He said he just needed time to dissolve the partnership properly. And I was alone and scared, and he kept coming back. Clara's voice was flat now, dead. Kept touching you, kept giving you children while I lay in our bed, wondering why I wasn't enough. Annalisa stared at her, and Clara saw it then, the same emptiness she felt, the same betrayal. This woman wasn't her enemy. She was another victim. Does he... Clara had to force the words out. Does he touch you, want you? Make you feel... Yes. Annalisa whispered it like a confession. Like an apology. He comes twice a week. Sometimes more. He brings gifts for the children. He holds me. He tells me he loves me. He makes me feel... She stopped, seeing Clara's face. Clara turned away. She couldn't breathe. Couldn't stand here and listen to how James gave this woman everything he'd stopped giving her. The intimacy, the desire, the tenderness. I should go, Clara said. Wait, Annalisa's voice stopped her. I'm not your enemy. I thought I was building a life. Instead, I'm just... His secret. You and me both. We're just things he uses. Clara looked back at her. At this small, beautiful woman who'd given James 3 children while Clara's body had failed again and again. What do we do? Annalisa asked quietly. Clara stood there in the cold morning air, between 2 houses and 2 lives, and felt something new growing inside her chest. Not rage anymore. Something colder, sharper. We make him pay, Clara said. Both of us, together. Clara didn't go home that night. She couldn't face that empty bed, that cold house built on lies. Instead, she rode to the church on the edge of town, where Father Miguel Sandoval kept a small room for travelers in need. He took one look at her face and asked no questions, just handed her a blanket and pointed to the bench by the fire. She sat there through the night, the ledger in her lap, planning. By morning, she knew exactly what to do. Sheriff Ezekiel Johnson arrived at the W 3 days later with James riding beside him. James looked confused, then annoyed when he saw Clara standing on the porch with half the town gathered in the yard. Sarah Chen, Father Miguel. Thomas Bear McAllister, the big half-Lakota veterinarian who treated their cattle last year. Even Nakoma, the Ute elder, stood at the edge of the crowd with 3 of his people. What's this about? James dismounted, his voice sharp. Clara, what are you doing? Calling in debts, Clara said. Her voice carried across the yard, clear and strong. This ranch, the W, was built with my money, my labor, my 9 years of breaking my back while you played house 8 miles south. James went white. Clara, I don't know what you think. I found the doll, James. She pulled it from her pocket, held it up for everyone to see. Para mi Rosita. From Papa, your daughter. One of 3 children you have with Annalisa Cortez, while I buried 3 babies under that cottonwood tree. Gasps rippled through the crowd. James's face shifted from shock to rage to fear in seconds. You're hysterical, he tried. Clara, you're not well, Sarah. Clara's voice cut through his lies. Show them. Sarah stepped forward with the ledger, opening it for Sheriff Johnson. 7 years of duplicate purchases. Baby clothes. Children's supplies. Medical care. All paid in cash, separate from household accounts, all while Mrs. Whitmore believed she was building a life with her husband. Sheriff Johnson's jaw tightened as he read. His dark eyes lifted to James. That true, Whitmore? It's complicated, James stammered. It's simple, Clara said. You married me for my money and my work. You used me to build this ranch while creating a family with another woman. And you did it with funds I earned, under territorial law. I have every right, James started. Under territorial law, Sheriff Johnson interrupted. His voice like iron. A man can't claim property through fraudulent marriage. And if Mrs. Whitmore can prove the ranch was built with her capital and labor while you misrepresented the marriage, I can prove it. Clara pulled out more papers. Letters from the bank showing her initial investment. Receipts in her name. Testimonies she'd gathered from ranch hands who'd watched her work while James traveled. Every fence post, every head of cattle, every building, mine. Thomas Bear McAllister stepped forward then, his massive frame drawing everyone's attention. I'll testify too. I've seen how she runs this place, how she works, and I've seen how he treats her. His eyes met Clara's, and something warm passed between them. Something that made her feel seen for the first time in years. James looked around at the gathered crowd, seeing his reputation crumble in real time. You can't do this. You're my wife, was I? Clara's voice broke finally. When did you treat me like a wife, James? When did you last touch me like you wanted me? When did you last make me feel like anything other than your workhorse? The crowd went silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. I gave you everything, Clara continued, tears streaming down her face now. My money, my body, my heart. I built your empire while you built a family with someone else. You took my passion and gave it to her. You took my dreams and made them his. You took everything I had and left me with nothing but an empty bed and a broken heart. James's face twisted. You think any man wants a woman like you? You're too tall, too strong, too magnificent, Bear's voice rang out. He stepped closer to Clara, standing beside her. She's magnificent. Any man who can't see that is a fool, Clara looked up at him, one of the few men, tall enough that she had to look up, and saw something in his eyes that James had stopped giving her years. Ego, desire, respect, want. The ranch is yours, Mrs. Whitmore, Sheriff Johnson said, closing the ledger. Built with your capital, maintained by your labor. Mr. Whitmore can contest it in territorial court, but with this evidence... He shook his head. You'll lose, Whitmore, and everyone in this valley will know why. James looked around desperately. No allies, no sympathy, just the judgment of a community that valued honor above all else. Get off my land, Clara said quietly. Take your horse. Take whatever clothes you can carry. But the ranch, the cattle, the house I built with my own hands, those stay with me. You'll regret this, James hissed. You'll end up alone. No man will want, I'll want her, Bear said simply. If she'll have me. When she's ready. If she ever is. I'll wait, Clara's breath caught. She looked at this massive, gentle man who'd always treated her with respect, who'd never flinched at her height, who looked at her now like she was something precious. James rode away that afternoon with nothing but his horse and his shame. The whole valley watched him go. Clara stood in the yard of her ranch, truly hers now, and felt something crack open inside her chest. Not breaking, opening, like ice melting after a long winter. Bear stayed close, but didn't push. Just stood there, solid and patient, waiting for her to decide what came next. I need time, Clara said finally. I know, Bear replied. I'll be here, however long it takes. And for the first time in 9 years, Clara Whitmore felt wanted, not for what she could build or earn or provide, just for being herself. The giant bride, powerful, untamed, magnificent. She'd lost a husband but found herself again, and somewhere 8 miles south, Annalisa Cortez was packing her things too, ready to start over with her children and her dignity intact. 2 women, 1 betrayal, both free. The ranch stood strong against the mountains, built to last, just like the woman who created it. Now I want to ask you something that's been on my mind while telling Clara's story. If you discovered that someone you loved had been living a completely different life behind your back, not for weeks or months, but for years, do you think you could ever trust anyone again? Or would you do what Clara did? Take back your power, rebuild on your own terms, and open your heart only when someone proves they see your true worth. I really want to know what you think. Drop your answer in the comments below. And one more thing, tell me where you're watching from right now. What city, what country? I love knowing that Clara's story is reaching people all over the world. Maybe you're watching from Colorado where this story takes place. Maybe you're halfway across the globe. Wherever you are, you're part of this community now. So comment below. Would you forgive or walk away? And where are you watching from? And if Clara's story moved you, if you felt her pain, her strength, her journey back to herself, hit that like button and subscribe. There are so many more stories like this one waiting to be told. Stories of betrayal and redemption. Stories of people who lost everything and built something even stronger. Don't miss the next one. I'll see you in the next story.